Welcome back to This Week. Time now to get the views of our media and political experts. MMA Creative Vice President, Democratic Operative Mike Kopp, and her daily on 1510 WLAC syndicated talk show host Steve Gill. Gentlemen, welcome. We're talking the election's over with. Nothing to talk about today. Huh? It got more busy this week than last week. Let's start local. Let's start with Congressman Scott DesJarlais. The divorce proceedings, the divorce papers come out and pretty much verify the accusations that were made. He admitted to an affair, had sex with several women, urged abortions, but he wins re-election, so does it really matter at this point?
I think it does, and I think it's going to be interesting that a lot of what we talk about today is going to be bookended. National sex and local sex.
There's a lot of that going on.
A lot of what was said before the election was in the context of a district that's even more Republican than it was before. And yet in Rutherford County, Scott DesJarlais barely carried the most Republican district in that congressional district that he has. It was like 47 to 45,000 votes. So I think he has serious problems in a primary, not in a general election. Plus, with this divorce transcript, we now learn that not only were there the two women we'd heard about, but at least one other patient that he was doing drugs with and providing drugs to, that there were a drug rep, two coworkers, and that his first wife, he apparently went along with abortions for her. This gets worse the more we find out, and he may be able to survive this general election, but a primary in about 18 months is going to be different.
And we're already hearing names of Republican candidates that are lining up. There's going to be a primary.
We were hearing names of Republican candidates before the election.
That's true, actually.
No, I completely agree with you. I think the primary election season has already started and I do think it's a Republican-leaning district. However, I will say that I think if the Democrats can field a candidate that maybe has better name recognition than the other one and can raise some money, which potentially they can, I think we can at least make it a competitive seat.
I think the difference is you're going to see a pendulum swing in 2 years, kind of like we saw in the last election cycle, where for the Democrats, for example, nationally there are 33 Senate seats up. 20 of those are Democrats, 6 are in red states, 6 are in swing states. So at the national level, both in the House and the Senate, I think you see a swing. But you're already hearing names like Representative Joe Carr, Senator Tracy. You're hearing other folks like Van Hillary, former congressman, being mentioned as well. I think that the key is who gets out early, because if you wait and allow somebody else to get ahead, then you have the argument that, well, you're divvying up the anti-DesJarlais vote, you're going to put him back in. I think getting in early is going to be the key, and so far most of these folks seem to be wanting to sit back.
I think the ideal Democratic candidate, though, to oppose the primary candidate for Republicans would be somebody that doesn't have any political package at all. Somebody from the business community or someone who's just well known in that district.
On the national scene, let's go to the whole issue here. General David Petraeus resigns amid a sex scandal. General John Allen, the head of Afghanistan, is involved. Paula Broadmoor, the biographer. Jill Kelly, the socialite.
Her crazy sister.
Where do you go from here? It's really a convoluted mess. It's a mess the Pentagon is dealing with. Now they have to come up with a new CIA director. We're still in the Benghazi issue. David Petraeus testified about that today.
I think the sad thing is you have 4 Americans die in this despicable act in Benghazi that gets covered up and lied about, and the testimony of General Petraeus apparently indicates that the White House, everybody knew immediately, was a terrorist attack. For weeks they went out and pretended it was about a movie, it was about a protest that didn't happen, and yet it took a sex scandal to put this thing really into the mainstream media talking about it, and they're still focused on the sex scandal rather than what I think are 4 scandals. Not providing security in Benghazi, not providing aid and assistance to those when they were under fire, lying about it after the fact, and then covering it up for the last several months. That's the real scandal, not who had sex with somebody else.
I think we're jumping to conclusions when you say there's a cover-up when there's still investigations going on the whole Benghazi thing. But on the sex scandal thing, I think, look, move over Kardashians. We have the Kelly sisters now. I mean, who knows where this thing's going to end. I do think that it does bring into question, I've heard today that they're now looking at whether or not they need to go back and re-educate some of our leaders in the military, from a morality standpoint. Who knows where that's going to end up, but it's certainly a mess.
I like the fact that you've got Leon Panetta talking about needing to have a zipper ethics seminar for our military. That would be the same Leon Panetta who ran the White House for Bill Clinton. There's just too much irony.
There's a lot of issues regarding Susan Rice, whether she would become the next Secretary of Defense, or Secretary of State, excuse me, and her testimony regarding Benghazi. The president is supporting her. Some Democratic senators are supporting her, saying she issued the talking points that were given to her. Now we know those talking points apparently changed, but as far as Susan Rice is concerned, she was saying what she was told to say.
Why was she put out as the spokesperson if she didn't know what she was talking about? You had the Secretary of Defense, you had the Secretary of State, you had the Director of National Intelligence. You had a whole host of people who could have gone out and spoken on those talking head shows. She was put out, frankly, to be the Baghdad Bob of this administration, say whatever they told her to say. And frankly, we need a Secretary of State that can stand on his or her own 2 feet, not simply be a puppet where you pull the string and they go say somebody else's talking points that bear no relation to the truth.
And the president saying it all ends with him, that he's the one responsible, not her, not the talking points, but it goes to him.
Absolutely. I will agree with Steve on this one point. I do think there is a lot of confusion about what's going on with these talking points and who was told to say what. However, on any given weekend in Washington, D.C., people are dispatched all across the networks to talk on all these umpteen different shows. She just happened to be on one where that became a center point. And was she given talking points that were misleading? Obviously, there is some question about that. I don't think she's to blame for that. I think, again, she was given the message. She simply delivered the message. She has not been in the middle of that issue. And I don't know that you want to really sort of hang that around her neck at this point.
The president went on The View. The president went to the United Nations 2 weeks afterwards and was still trying to pretend this was about a movie and a protest. We now know that was absolutely not true. I think this thing has all the earmarks of a political cover-up. They wanted to make it look like it was about radical Islam rather than their incompetence. And whether it was her, whether it was Leon Panetta, whether it was the defense secretary, the CIA director, or Susan Rice, they were all part of it.
Does the president have to be the one to come forward and say, we did not handle this the way we should have handled it, we should have handled it differently? Is that what has to happen?
Oh, I think it starts with the Secretary of State. I mean, I think, clearly the security issues and all those kind of things follow under her jurisdiction, and she's already said that. I think she's trying to get to the bottom of it herself, and I think once she does, this will all become clear. Again, I would disagree with Steve. I don't know that it's a little premature to say there's been this massive cover-up.
We know, though, that there was a 7-hour firefight that took place here with request for aid, request for assistance. You had 2 CIA agents who basically broke the orders not to go save others, who were targeting with lasers the mortars that were being used to attack this facility. They were targeting them, putting them on the flashpoint because they believed help was on the way. Who issued the orders to say no help? Because the president himself has said, my initial response was, we're going to do everything we can to send help to those guys. Either he didn't really issue that order, or people didn't follow his orders, and if that's the case, why haven't they been fired?
While a huge and important issue, does this issue need to get resolved, get solved, so that other issues, the fiscal cliff which is looming, and others can be dealt with? Because until it does, those other issues are not going to be dealt with.
It clearly does, simply in the foreign policy arena, because we have an escalating situation going on between Israel and the Gaza Strip, and I think that needs to be a serious focal point for our diplomats and also our defense. But yeah, I think it is going to get resolved. I think there's a rush to try to come to some conclusion. I think we need to let the facts come out, and when they do, I think this all become much clearer.
Keep in mind, the FBI went in and was taking documents from Jill Kelly and Paula Broadwell within about 48 hours after this Petraeus story breaking. It took them 4 weeks to go into Benghazi. There are apparently still documents strewn around that consulate that are secure documents. The FBI didn't even make their way there to get an investigation
underway. About 45 seconds left. It really is getting serious and intense in Israel. We don't know where that's going to lead, but it is very tense.
When you put terrorists in charge of a place like Egypt and allow terrorists to run a place like Hamas in Palestine, you've got problems.
I think the only thing that can save it right now is the emissaries from these other countries, Middle Eastern countries, that are gathering at Gaza to try to bring down the tension a little bit. Hopefully that's going to make a difference.
Steve Gill, Mike Kopp, appreciate your time and your insight. Stay with us. This Week continues in a moment.